Hello and welcome to Dream Corner, the show dedicated to inspiring women of all ages to follow their dreams and passion. On today's show, I'm interviewing Margaret Webster. Margaret is a copywriter. She works with a range of businesses, from big multinationals to small businesses. She says her first proper job was working as a marketing executive, and then she went on to be the marketing manager for London Business School. And she also worked with FT Knowledge, that's Financial Times Knowledge, and then the London Stock Exchange and Network Rail before she set up her own business. She says her passion is helping her clients communicate with their customers and sell their products. So, a very warm welcome, Margaret. How are you?
Hello, I'm fine. Thank you for having me, Viv.
It's really lovely to meet you. We've had a few Twitter exchanges and Google Plus exchange.
It's been really fun.
Yeah. So to finally meet you in flesh, I feel like I already know you.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's really nice to see you.
So how are you, and how has 2013 been so far?
Well, it's been a good year, actually. It's been fun. I've had a good year. I've been working with some very interesting projects, interesting people, and I'm starting a few new things. So, yeah, halfway through, I think it's been good.
I know. Can you believe it's already June?
No.
Well, almost July.
I don't want to think about it.
No, I know. So let's talk about the start of your career. I said your first proper job was at London Business School. So why do you say it's your first proper job?
Well, I graduated from university into a recession, and I was armed with an arts degree, so I was pretty much qualified for nothing. So I and I wasn't very focused either. I think that was my other problem. So I started off, I wanted a job which involved communications and writing, because they were the things that I was always really interested in. When I was at school and university, I was always drawn to those sort of subjects. So I quickly realized that marketing was going to be the best place for me. But at the time, it was sort of a vicious circle of you needed experience to get a job, and you needed a job to get experience. So I started off doing admin work and various sort of starter jobs, which have largely disappeared now in this world of internships. But that gave me a little bit of experience, and then I was able to get a job in the executive education department of London Business School as a marketing executive. And that's where it all started for me.
Yeah. Then you progressed on to marketing manager.
Yes, I was there for about 5 years.
Oh, that's
So,
a long time.
yeah, it's quite a long time. It was a really interesting place to work because we marketed the short courses to business executives, so not the MBA programs, but all the short courses. And it was just fascinating working with the professors and meeting people from companies all over the world. It was one of those places that was difficult to leave. And there were a lot of opportunities in the marketing department at the time. So I had opportunities to do some really interesting work with some very nice people. So, yeah, it's great.
You know, I used to work for Middlesex Business School.
Oh, really?
Because I was doing the equivalent of the marketing
Yeah.
executive
So you know
role.
what I mean? It's
Exactly,
a really
yeah.
stimulating environment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you moved on to the London Stock Exchange, and what was it? Because that's very different in terms of sector.
Well, what happened is I actually first went to FT Knowledge, and I was very interested in e-learning at the time, and to be honest, I still am. But it was just starting because it was the early days of the internet, and companies were just starting to investigate how they could teach people online. And Pearson set up a company called FT Knowledge, which was working with some of the business schools in the States. And I just thought that was just the most fascinating opportunity. So I went there as a program manager. But rather embarrassingly, I discovered I was pregnant on my second day.
Oops.
So they couldn't have been nicer, and it was a great job. But I left when I had my first child, and in fact, Pearson decided not to continue with that particular experiment. So the whole division shut down about the time I left, by coincidence.
Maybe your pregnancy had something.
Maybe, probably not. And then my boss at FT Knowledge went to London Stock Exchange, and he needed an interim marketing manager for about 3 or 4 months between one person leaving and the next person starting. So he asked me to do that. So that gave me my first freelance job. I was very fortunate it came to me. And that kind of set me towards copywriting, because at the end of the project, I asked him if he would give me a review. And he said to me, you should focus on the thing that you're best at, which is writing. And you should drop the things that you're not particularly skilled at, like databases, which is quite an important part of marketing. So just focus on the writing. And I just had that feeling of just immense relief that
Really?
it was almost like someone said, gave me permission to just do the thing I liked the most. And since that day, I have just focused on the copywriting.
That's interesting, because I think we always feel we have to have all these other skills, multi-skilled to do a particular job. And for him to say that to you, why do you think he was keen for you to focus on copywriting?
Well, in the job I did for him, there was actually someone else setting up the database, so that wasn't really part of my responsibility, but I did sort of campaigns for him and I did some writing for him. And he said the best work was the writing. The other stuff was fine, and it's a good thing you weren't involved with the database. But the best stuff was the writing, and I really think you should focus on that. And I just thought I can use all my marketing skills, but just focus it through the copywriting, and that's what I've been doing. And that's I think works well, particularly in this day and age. People are specializing more and more. So
niche.
Yeah, and you play to your strengths.
Yeah. So, just so we tell our audience what copywriting is, how would you describe copywriting?
Okay, as a copywriter, I'm a writer who specializes in marketing communications. So I write websites, brochures, newsletters, email follow-ups, magazine articles, blog articles, anything that companies need to communicate with their customers and sell their products.
Very succinct. And I guess from that job at London Stock Exchange, and you were freelancing, you had the confidence to freelance, or how did it pan out that you started your own consultancy?
Well, again, I was very fortunate because my next job was again an invitation, because I knew the marketing director at Network Rail knew me and he knew my work, and he asked me to write their website. So my first project was this very big, I think it was the 3-month project. It was about 90 days or something. It was huge. We wrote hundreds and hundreds of pages on dozens and dozens of subjects. And it was fascinating because we identified something like 20 different audiences. So we obviously had rail passengers. We had the people who run the rail companies, MTs, really disadvantaged communities who live near the railway, people whose properties back onto the railway, environmental groups. It was just a huge range of people, and we had to think about what those audiences needed, what kind of information they needed, how to structure it, how to make it engaging. And so that was my first copywriting project. And then after that, I've used networking and now increasingly my blog and newsletter to market myself.
Interestingly, you were saying freelancing, but you have children.
Yes.
And how does that work now? Is it better that you're freelance, or you run your own business now, than when you were working full time?
Well, I never worked for a company after I had children, so I've only freelanced with kids. So both my big projects were part-time, they were 3 days a week, and I had very small children then. So they're now at school, so I try and do most of my work in school hours. It doesn't always work out that way, because obviously I have to respond to my clients' needs and their schedules. But it's probably the best possible solution for me and my family. It's not perfect, but nothing is. So.
I don't think there's ever a perfect situation. Even when I ask other guests work-life balance, and they say, "What's that?" Everybody just works the hours they have to work.
Yes.
There's nothing about a balance.
Yeah.
There's a different kind of balance, or you redefine what balance is according to your own needs.
Well, that's exactly right. So I have an office in my house, so I don't spend any time commuting. If I need to do half an hour's work quickly during school holidays, that's fine, because everything's there. If I need to do work in the evening, that's also easy. So it's the best solution for us.
So, talking about growing your business and looking at the recession, has the recession had any effect on your work?
I think some people are very concerned about investing in their communications. It can be they can find spending money on designers and websites, developers, copywriters, a big ask in the current situation. Even big companies can be reluctant. It can be something they sort of put off. But I also find a lot of people understand that they really need to have a good professional presence. They need to be clear. They need to appeal to their customers, and they need to explain things clearly. And they want a professional team to help them do that.
Yeah. Just thinking back to the work with Network Rail, did you write everything yourself, or you had a team of people who you were working with?
I wrote everything myself.
Oh my gosh.
So we mostly had the same tone of voice, which just means every page sounded similar. But because we had so many different audiences, there were some pages that we had to modify the way we sounded. So, for example, we had some pages about finances, which were aimed mostly at people in the financial community, even investment bankers. So we used a very, very formal tone for them and use technical language because we are communicating to experts. But with other audiences, for example, the most extreme audience the other way was the disadvantaged communities. We use very sort of clear, short, straightforward messages in very everyday, no jargon, nothing technical, quite informal language because we wanted to be friendly and approachable to those people. So it was good doing everything so I worked a lot with the people in Network Rail, but it was good sort of having one set of eyes, I think, on it so you could see the whole project from one side to the other.
And I guess that was a good model for you, thinking of other projects that you were working on.
Yes.
Or you came to work on later on.
Well, that's right. I think the most important thing with marketing and copywriting is that you have to think about your audience. It's really tempting to think about yourself and what's
of course, we're more important.
What's important to me, what's interesting to me, and actually the reason people come to any business is they want to solve a problem. So they have some problem that they want a solution for. They have some goal that they're trying to achieve. They have things that appeal to them and attract them more than others, and they are the things that we need to think about when we're communicating with those people. And you see some really great examples of that.
I think even with so many people who are running their own businesses today, we think we can do it because we know the content or we know what it is we're trying to communicate. But I think, and I'll talk about myself in particular, I think for myself, I always focus on the service, and this is what I've come to realize in the last couple of weeks, that I focus on the service rather than the value of who needs what it is I'm offering. And because people keep on saying, but you know what you're talking about. Other people don't know, and they don't know the value of what you're saying because you're just talking in terms of service rather than benefits to
That's right. It's often very tempting to talk about the thing we do rather than the result that we achieve. And the thing that your customer is buying is the result.
Yeah. So do you find that this is a common problem with small businesses that you work with?
Quite often. I think it's hard to see the wood for the trees. Quite often they don't see the amazing things that they're doing for their customers, or they think that it's obvious. They think, oh, they will know that. Well, they'll know it more if you tell them.
So you work on websites, you work on brochures. Is there a different way to communicate when you're using different channels?
Oh, absolutely. The medium that you're reading on really affects the way you read. So if you read on paper, paper anchors you physically to the text that you're reading. And it's a slower and slightly more passive experience. But if you think about when you're reading on screen, it's all about scrolling and it's all about clicking and it's all about skim reading. So you're physically moving. Also, the screen makes your eyes more tired than paper does, and that has an effect as well. And so when people read on screen, they are more distractible and they're a lot more impatient.
Me too.
Yeah, it's really common. The same content on a screen will be a different experience. And of course, we use screens of all different sizes, from small BlackBerry-style screens right up to great big computer screens.
So how do you explain that to a client when you say, look, I need to create two separate pieces of information for your brochure and for your website?
Well, a lot of people just focus on the website. So, there's a couple of things. You need to make your content skim-readable so that people can glance down the page and get the main points. So the headlines are really important, the subheadings are really important, and the opening paragraphs are really important. Those three things are the most critical thing on the page. So you need to make it very skim-readable, and you need to get to the point straight away. So you've got to have a big bang at the beginning, because the first thing people will see on the page on their website is the headline and the opening paragraph. So you've got to immediately connect with people. You can't waffle on for half a page because they've already clicked away to the next page. So that's the key thing with websites. With brochures, you will see the whole page.
Okay.
Well, brochures on paper, but increasingly people are using apps and PDFs to read content that they used to read on paper. So magazines, newspapers, brochures, white papers, leaflets, all of those things are more and more being read on a screen. So even when you design things like that, you still have to think about how they'll be read on a screen. But with paper, you can be sure people can see the whole page at one time. But with computers or iPhones or iPads, they can only see a screen at a time, and you don't know how big their screen is. So you've got to get to the point straight away.
Not quite thought about it. It's always interesting, I think, for me, when I'm interviewing people and they're giving me lots of nuggets of information that I'm like, okay, I need to go and implement something right now.
I'm just finished an ebook on how to write for people who read on screen, so I'll have to send it to you. It's just being designed at the moment. But it's a really fascinating, interesting subject, and I think it's important that people who write for their customers understand it, because almost everything that you write will be read on a screen.
Yeah, and I think increasingly people like yourselves or the services you offer are more important. It's just understanding the value that you bring to the business that people need to understand. So what would you say to people who kind of like shrugging their shoulders on copywriting?
Well, I think some people who run businesses are very good at communicating themselves. They have a knack for it, and I think, for example, Johnny Bowden, who runs Bowden Clothing, my understanding is that he writes his copy, or at least he used to write his own copy, and he's really good at it. There's a lady called Jane Michelle who runs a company called Jane Plan, and you know Jane. I think she writes her own stuff, and she's great at it. But if you have that knack, it's fantastic. But the thing a copywriter can do is save you time, and also they should understand marketing and communication and writing. They should be able to bring those three disciplines together and produce something that will really work for your customers and for you.
But I guess for someone like me, if I was going to hire you to write content on my website, I would still need to know to write out the full content of what it is I'm offering? No? Not a brief like that?
No, most people just brief me verbally.
Really?
Yes, I interview them just like you're interviewing me.
Okay, so let's do a role play now. So tell
Okay.
okay, go on.
Well, the first thing I would ask is tell me about your customers.
Okay, so my customers, I have 3 sets of customers, or maybe
Okay.
more. So I offer, and I'm talking about my other business,
Okay.
not Dream Corner, but AudioBite.
Okay.
So on AudioBite, I help my clients communicate their information with audio
Okay.
and podcasts.
So who are they? Are they businesses or individuals?
Businesses, so professional services, authors, and
Okay.
entrepreneurs.
Okay. And what's important to them?
I think a hassle-free service.
Okay.
Yes.
So they want to be able to record their audio quickly.
Yes.
And do you what else do you provide? Do you come to them or do they come to you?
I go to them.
Okay, so you save them a lot of time.
Yes.
Okay, so is that one of the things that you communicate on your website, that you save them a lot of time?
No.
So you save them the travelling time, and you save them also the faffing about time where they learn that skill and actually produce it themselves. They can just produce their podcast really quickly.
Exactly.
Okay, so that would be one of the things that we would communicate up front.
Okay. I hope people are not listening and going to go straight to my website, because it's definitely nowhere near that. So just this brief conversation, you probably would go to my website and get a bit more information of what I've said.
Absolutely, yes. So I always prepare for meetings by reading the existing material, but I ask people a lot of questions about their business, their products, their services, but a lot about their customers. So what are your customers' problems? What problems? How do you help them? What goals are they trying to achieve? What makes them anxious? What do they worry about? So do your customers worry about sound quality? Do they worry about security? Do they worry about having to re-record it? because the recording hasn't worked for some reason. What are their ambitions? What are their dreams?
And what are their goals, their business goals?
Yes, exactly.
As well. Yeah.
How do they use your product? Where do they use it? All that kind of stuff. And the more I understand them, then the more I'm able to communicate with them on your behalf.
You've just sold yourself your services.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah, because, honestly, I've been meeting up with this friend of mine. We go to networking events, and when people ask me what I do, I always stumble. And they're looking at me like, okay. And then she'll say to me later on, you haven't communicated what exactly you do, the benefit of what you give to them. And I think because podcasts and audio interviews are not really as widespread in, say, the US, people say podcast, okay. And because they don't want to sound like they don't know what it is, they wouldn't ask.
Yes.
They just sort of move on in the conversation.
Sense.
Yeah. So I think I have two tasks: communicating the value, but also educating how they can use the service more effectively.
That sounds like maybe a really small blog. You wouldn't maybe necessarily have to do a post every week, but maybe just 4 or 5 blogs on how podcasts can help you build your business, how to get started with podcasts, how to come up with ideas for your podcasts, maybe pointing them towards 4 or 5 of your clients who do really great podcasts. That kind of thing could help them to teach themselves at home without any embarrassment.
Interesting. So one of the things you're working on writing tactics for busy people.
That's my newsletter.
Yeah, so tell us about that.
So I send out a newsletter about once a month, which I'm hoping to increase the frequency over the autumn. And the idea is that I understand that people who run companies, run businesses, are very busy. And they have a lot to do in the day without planning marketing communications and executing marketing activities. So I try and provide tips so that they can do it more quickly and better.
Does it work? Have you got any response from it so far?
I've been doing it for about a year, and I have had a few nice stories of people who've said that they changed the way they write. So, for example, I had one very simple article on 5 boring, overused words that you should cut out of your cut from your marketing.
Please tell me.
Well, very is one. It doesn't really add anything, and things like luxury and literally, they don't really tell people anything. So I suggested that, and I ran into one of my someone I know through networking who gets the newsletter, and she said, "Do you know, every time I write very, I have to delete it." So just even simple things like that, because if you cut out those waffly, unnecessary words, your writing is clearer and your meaning is much more immediate.
Actually, one word I cut out every now and again is that.
Yes.
Because sometimes that is so irrelevant in the if you take it out, it's not going to change the meaning of the sentence. Yeah.
It can make your writing seem overly formal. A conversational tone is much more attractive.
Yeah. Okay, you've been doing this for a number of years. Have you noticed the way we communicate? The way we use words on websites and newsletters and just getting our message across. Has the style changed in any way?
Yes, it has. People write in bite size now. So one thing that I really notice is paragraphs are a lot shorter. Paragraphs sometimes used to have 3 or 4 ideas, but now they just have 1. And I think that's right, because they're much easier to skim read. Especially on a screen.
Yeah, I was just going to say, taking into account using smartphones and tablets.
Exactly. People use subheadings a lot more, which also help with skim reading. And people use a much more conversational, everyday tone. So that really formal language with, everything, no contractions, so it would all be do not do this rather than don't, is sort of slowly dying away, even in quite formal professional services firms like lawyers. Slowly, maybe not lawyers, but accountants are getting there.
For you, what would be your ideal client?
I like working with a range of clients. I actually think one of the privileges of my job is sitting down and having conversations with people about what they do and really finding out how they do it. And I've worked with all kinds of people, from finance people to railway people, medical people, or every kind of business really. And I just find that incredibly interesting. And so my ideal client is really anybody who wants to truly communicate with their customers and engage their interests.
Do you find that you have to have a lot of knowledge about the sector when you're writing about their website or a client's website?
It really depends. If someone asks me to communicate on behalf of experts with other experts, so for example, if you're an IT person and you're IT company and you're communicating with IT directors, you have to have a certain type of conversation and you have to include technical language. But if you're the same company and communicating with non-IT people, then that technical language is just meaningless jargon. So I'm not good at expert-to-expert
Comms.
copy. There are people who specialize in that type of writing. But what I am good at is expert to non-expert, because I don't know the answer. I'm like their customers. I don't know what they're talking about. I just know.
It's to me like I'm a 4-year-old.
Exactly. I just have a problem that I want them to solve. So I almost translate for the company into everyday language that their non-technical customers can understand and find appealing.
Are you finding that your former contacts are sort of key to you growing your business still?
Yes, I've been very fortunate. So I had a good start in my business. I met some great people through networking. I try and stay in touch with people. That's why I set up the newsletter about 9 months, a year ago. So that really helps. And I also try and stay in touch with people on Twitter and Google+. I just find that's a nice way of just kind of having that water cooler chat that you would have if you worked in the same office.
Do you find that you brought up social media, so I thought, okay, maybe that's my intro into that. Do you find that it's a good way to get customers, or just generally keeping in touch with people?
Well, initially I was just using it to stay in touch with people I already knew. But I've had, over the last sort of 3 to 6 months, I've kind of been more adventurous. And I had a client, a guy I met on Twitter in Poland has asked me to do a joint venture with him. So I'm having a meeting with him on Skype next week. And I met these two lovely guys who've set up this publishing company called Wingers Guides. And I've just signed a contract with them to write a book on email marketing. And I'm also...
Slow down. Don't rush over that. That's amazing.
Yeah, so I think, just to answer that question, I think with Twitter you have the opportunity to meet a really wide variety of people and to start conversations with them, and they can lead to actual projects, I think.
So tell us about this book thing.
The book.
I think that's fascinating.
Well, email marketing is just one of the most powerful ways of communicating with people. And that's probably my single biggest regret in my business, is not setting up a newsletter years ago, because I really just focused on networking. But it's very powerful, and it's very simple these days because of the great email systems out there like Constant Contact and Campaign Monitor. So they've asked me to just write a very short guide. I think it's going to be about 4,000 or 5,000 words, about 20 pages. Just giving people, here's everything you need to know to get started on email marketing.
Wow. And is it going to be free download, or is it going to be paid?
It's going to be £5. So, and it's going to be downloadable from their website. So it's basically, if you're thinking of setting up a newsletter and you want to know if it's worthwhile and how you go about it, it's just a quick, here's everything you need to know, here's the main points, this is what you'd need to cover and need to think about, go.
You know, it's funny you say that. Yesterday I was thinking about a newsletter for AudioBite.
Yes.
I don't have one for Dream Corner, and I think Google Plus is doing my email marketing for Dream Corner, so I'm kind of happy with that. But with AudioBite, I'm thinking about setting up a newsletter, and I'm wondering, okay, so what am I going to use to start capturing information? And I've had this ebook in my head I've actually written it out.
Great.
No, but just listening to you now, I'm thinking, I don't know if the language is going to be good enough.
No, I think that's the single biggest problem that we all have, is we immediately come up with a plan and immediately start doubting ourselves and think we can't do it. So I bet it's much better than you're thinking right now.
Well, it has. I think the content of it is good, and I think people will value it because of my experience. It's about, I think, seven things to do when you go for an interview or before you go for an interview.
That sounds great.
So it's, I think some people would really value that, and I've just been collecting information or noticing things that people do when they come for my interviews and how they perform. And, some people do a whole lot better than others.
Yes.
And I think if people knew some things ahead of the interview, they would actually perform better. And I'll give you a very good example. I was interviewing a lady recently, and I sent her some questions, because I always send questions, and she didn't read the questions, and she turned off. And I said, "Oh, did you read the questions?" She said, "Oh, yes, I did, and there's something there I'm not sure that I don't really want to talk about." I was like, "Oh, okay." So I opened up my questions, and and we went through each of them. She was like, oh, actually, I didn't read the questions. Oh. And I was like, all right, okay. And I said, but are you happy with them now? She said yes. And then she started talking before we started the interview. So by the time I got to the questions, because she had already told me about it before the interview, she
sounded quite stale.
Quite stale. And she didn't talk about it in as much detail as I would have expected her to do, because
she'd already covered it. Okay.
Yeah. So that made the interview shorter, and it made the interview seem all over the place. We didn't really cover all the stuff that I knew she had within her, because she had already talked about it.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So
that sounds really valuable. I mean, this is the first radio interview I've ever done, and I would have loved to have read something like that. So it sounds like a great idea.
Yeah. So that was one thing. And another thing was the lady who she had the questions, and she came to the interview, and she just went off track. She just talking about something completely different, and then we're winding down. She's like, "Oh my God, are we finishing? I haven't talked about this.
It's too late."
It was too late. So I just thought, oh, gosh, I couldn't stop her mid-flow, because then she would have been disorientated and, trying to get everything in, and, it would have just wrecked it. So I just wanted her to be comfortable. So I let her continue. Yeah, so it's those sorts of things that I want people to be aware of. And not necessarily just because you're coming for an interview with me, but you're going for an interview somewhere else.
Yes.
You should think about what that would...
That sounds great, because you have more experience in interviewing people for radio than most of us. And so it would be really useful to have tips on how to succeed. And I think that's the kind of valuable content that would get people to sign up to your email list. And you could have lots of tips about how to prepare for a podcast, how to sound relaxed, how to ask questions, how to prepare, how to close an interview, all those kind of things which people who are just starting on their journey would find really useful. So I think it's those sort of things that work well in a newsletter, definitely.
Yeah. I think I better get on to it now. You've given me more confidence.
Go for it.
Okay, so as we round up, what do you know now that you wish you knew at the very start?
I think, as I said, I wish I'd set up my newsletter earlier, because I think it's important to stay in touch with people regularly, and also it does demonstrate your value and your experience. So I think newsletters are that's probably the thing I wish I had done most of all. Yeah.
Just apart from that, what about, because people always say that if they knew, they would have started their business a lot sooner. And I guess one question I was going to ask you is, did you always know you were going to work for yourself?
No, I was the most surprised of anybody. I always thought I would have a corporate career, and I was expecting to go back to work after I had my first child. But it just didn't work out that way. And then once I started freelancing, it seemed the best way of combining work and children. And now I really love working with lots of different people. So I love working with lots of different clients, and I partner with different designers and web developers and search engine consultants and marketing consultants. And I love that diversity. So I think I'm kind of hooked on it.
Yeah. And what's not to be hooked on? Because I think when I was doing this questionnaire, I was answering this questionnaire about what values would you like in your business. And one of the things that I identified was the variety.
Yes.
I wouldn't want to work with the same type of client all the time, because I get bored very easily.
Yes.
And I like to know that I can, dip my toe in different ponds, as they.
Well, it's nice to be challenged constantly,
Yeah,
isn't it? So every project is different and every client is different, every partner is different. And when you're constantly having that challenge, it's very exciting.
Yeah, and I think that's why I really love AudioBite as a venture, because I can do so many things with it. I can work with authors and different type of authors as well. I can work with businesses. I can work with professional services. So you have accountants, lawyers, insurance brokers. I can work with entrepreneurs as well for different types of projects. And I think for me, that's what will keep me happy.
Exciting, isn't it?
It's really exciting.
Yeah, I completely understand that.
Yeah. So what tips would you give anyone who's thinking of copy for their website? Yes.
I suppose, as well as obviously writing so that it's skim readable and getting to your most exciting, valuable point first, I think adopt a conversational style. So if you think about the people you're writing with and think about how you would talk with them if they were actually physically in the room with you, then that's the kind of language that you should use. So if you use a very formal, professional tone because it's a very serious business, then that's right for you. And if it's something that's really fun and informal and something they would do maybe on the weekend or their holidays, then go for it. Have a fun style on your website or your brochure.
Wow, thank you very much, Margaret. It's been lovely. Really enjoyed this.
Me too. Thanks so much, Viv. It's been really lovely.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. If you've kept us company on Dream Corner, thank you very much. See you next time on Dream Corner. Cheers then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.